So you've made it into your OP-12 release event and you're wondering what cards should you be putting into your deck and what strategies you should take to win. You've come to the right place. I'm Artris, and in this video we're going to be going over all of that, the general strategies in order to win these events, and the best cards you can be putting into your deck. But before we go over all of that, please make sure to sub to the channel and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoy the video or find anything in this useful for you. With these events, you're given 6 packs, and out of those 6 packs, you have to build a 40 card deck. Yes, the deck is going to be random. The cards that you're going to get are all random, but that being said, you can make some decisions based off of what you pull to better your chances of winning. With the more recent release events, I've noticed the trend of more shops straying away from bringing your own leader and instead having everybody play the Rainbow Luffy so that everyone is on the same playing field. I actually kind of like that as opposed to bringing your own leader overall, because if that's the case, most people will just play Red Sanji. But regardless, I think it's still important to note which leaders are decent to bring to these events, so we'll go over those rather quickly. That is, if your local card shop does allow you to bring your own leader. Red has the most solid amount of leaders to choose from if you're going to be bringing your own. First off, we have OP-01 Zoro, which will be able to buff all of your characters on your side of the field. We have the Starter Deck 1 Luffy, which will be able to give a Rested Dawn to a leader or a character. We have OP-07 Dragon, which can give a total of 2 of your currently attached Dawn to one of your characters. We have OP-09 Shanks, which can minus 1,000 power to 1 attack from either your opponent's leader or character. And of course, we have the best leader hands down for this kind of event with PRB-01 Sanji, which can give your cost 8 or lower characters without on-play effects Rush, which is very powerful. In blue, we have Starter Deck 3 Crocodile, which I don't see this played very often, but it is important to note that it could be played, and it's a pretty solid generic effect, just returning a character of cost 5 or less to the owner's hand for Dawn -4. For green, we have Starter Deck 2 Eustace Captain Kidd, which can restand itself for 3 Dawn and pitching a card from hand. This used to be one of the best cards, if not the best card to play at these events, but it has been overshadowed by another green card with the OP-07 Bonnie leader, being able to only pay 1 Dawn on defense and rest up to one of your opponent's leaders or characters. I think that this leader itself is probably the second best to choose from if you have to choose one. Of course, Sanji, just bar none, is the best overall. In yellow, we have Charlotte Katakuri from OP-03. Dawn ×1 when attacking. You can look at the top life of you or your opponent's life area and put it either at the top or bottom, and then you get an additional plus 1,000 power for the battle. So being able to see what's coming up either in your life or your opponent's is pretty useful knowledge. For multicolor leaders, we have a few to choose from. We have Red, Yellow, Sabo. Dawn ×1, you can activate main once per turn, add 1 cost 3 or higher character with 7,000 power or more to the top of your life face up, and then give up to one of your characters plus 2,000 power until the start of your next turn. This one's always a sleeper one because of the fact that it can regenerate itself, plus also buff characters on its side of the field. We have Nico Robin, which is a banish leader, probably the most important thing to note there. We have Yamato, a green-yellow leader that has double attack, so if you do have a fair amount of 4 life leaders in the meta, then this is probably a decent one to choose. You have Nami from the previous set, which has a couple of cool effects here. One being able to draw cards on your turn if you have 7 or less and you do damage to either yourself or your opponent, and then the other effect being a tanky effect, so that you can pitch cards from hand to give your leader plus 2,000 power. So those 2 effects are pretty strong overall. In general, though, you're not going to want to bring 4 life leaders to this event because of the fact that you have less card draw overall, but because of this leader ability, it kind of helps mitigate that. And then from OP-12, I do think that this green Zoro is a pretty solid leader to play. Being able to attack into the board and then also be able to attack into the opponent's life in the same turn is pretty powerful, and there's a lot of cards that synergize with this leader effect overall. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this, a lot of stores nowadays don't even allow you to bring your own leader just because of how powerful like Sanji or Bonnie or Kid can be, and so many will just give you a Rainbow Luffy at the start of the event to play with, and this leader is treated as a card with all card names, types, and attributes according to the rules, so this will allow you to play things that might be leader locked for this event. So it's pretty important to note that this is probably the card you will be playing with, and so as we go along and go over the cards in this set, I will keep this in mind for the cards we're reviewing. So which cards should you be prioritizing for your deck? That's very simple. I have an acronym that you can remember for these events called G.R.A.P.E. It stands for Game Winners, Removal, Advantage, Protection, and everything else. So the game winners are very simple. These are cards that will affect the board state phenomenally in your favor. Usually they're going to be really powerful characters, but I will say up front that this set, OP-12, feels a lot weaker than any of the other sets for Sealed, and so as a result, I've kind of had to move the goalposts for our are game winners, which you'll see in a bit. For removal, that's anything that can interact with the board, whether that's KO effects or with green being able to rest things or bottom decking or putting things in life. Being able to answer the board is pretty important in this card game. So removal is pretty important to find. Advantage for me is typically going to be like card draw or any way to increase your hand size, but also on the flip side of that, it can be ways to diminish your opponent's hand size. So that's another thing to keep in mind when you are looking for cards that give you advantage. Protection, very simply, are any 2Ks, blockers, or events that can help you stay alive longer. And the E is for everything else, which is exactly that. It's everything else that doesn't fit within the G, R, A, and the P. And so usually these are going to be vanillas or cards that have okay stat lines, and maybe you're not initially impressed by them, but you have some spots available to put into the deck, and so those cards fit that role. So as I mentioned, with the game winners, we're going to have to really move the goalpost as opposed to previous sets to be able to fit cards within what I consider game winners. These cards are going to be, once they hit the field, are hard to answer for your opponent, or literally cards that can help you win the game. So starting off, we have Dracula Mihawk, an 8-cost, 8,000 power blocker. On play, set up to 4 rested Dawn cards as active. Then you may not play a character with an original cost of 7 or more during this turn. There's not a lot of cards that will be 7 cost or more in the game for sealed, so you don't really have to worry about that second part of the clause. And getting Dawn back so that you can use for other effects or playing another character is pretty important. And of course, the stat line is really nice. Being able to have an 8K body that also acts as a blocker is pretty powerful for you to be able to push for game. Next up, we have Demonic Aura 9 Swords style Asura Blades Drawn Dead Man's Game. It's a really long name, yes I know, but this is a really important card for going for game because of the main effect here, resting 3 of your Dawn cards plus the 1 cost for the actual card. You can rest up to a total of 2 of your opponent's characters or Dawn cards. More than likely, you're going to be using that to rest your opponent's characters, so blockers on the side of the field that will be in the way for you when you're trying to go for game. So this is a game winner in the sense that you are closing out the game by resting your opponent's blockers. Next up, we have Luffy is the man who will become the king of the pirates. This is an important card for you to be able to close the game out with because you can get multiple swings in with your leader, especially if you're playing Rainbow Luffy. The setup to one of your Zoro leaders as active means that your Luffy is technically a Zoro when you have the all traits effect. So this card will allow you to swing twice with your leader, and sometimes your opponent might not expect that second swing coming their way. Next up, we have a 6-cost, 7,000 power Nico Robin. It says if your leader is Koala or Monkey D. Luffy, this character gains blocker and +3 cost. What I find really important about this card and why it's in the game winners is that the on play says you may trash 1 card from your hand. If your opponent has 5 or more cards in their hand, your opponent trashes 2 cards from their hand. So in the game of sealed, you have a very limited hand size usually throughout the game, and if you are punishing your opponent further by requiring them to trash 2 cards out of their hand, their resource management is going to be horrible, and you can usually pull ahead, and it's hard for an opponent to come back at that point in the game, especially when they've just dropped 2 cards, and likely 2 cards that they might need for counter power, or possibly cards that will be good for them to win the game with. Next up, we have the 8-cost, 8,000 power Don Quixote do Flamingo. If you have 2 or less life cards, this character gains rush, and then the opponent's turn on KO, add up to 1 card from the top of your deck to the top of your life cards. This card is actually closer to a game winner in general if this set was a little bit better, so I actually consider this probably the strongest card out of the ones we've reviewed so far, outside of maybe Mihawk. That card is pretty good. And then finally, I have the 6-cost, 7,000 power Kuma. On play, trash a card from your hand, add the top card of your deck to the top of your life cards, then this character gains +2 cost until the end of your opponent's next turn, and then on the opponent's turn, on KO, add the top card of your deck to the top of your life cards. This will help you extend the game a little bit longer, and this can also throw a wrench in your opponent's game strategy by getting you maybe to a certain life threshold, and if you're able to heal back up and then also have the on KO effect take place, you extend the game out and you get more of a card advantage over time. So because of that, I think that Kuma is actually a pretty good card, and you're going to want to include this in your deck, of course. It helps yellow in general once standard comes into play, but outside of standard, I think this is not necessarily the strongest card when it comes to power, but just the effect of being able to heal twice with this is really, really strong. On to removal, we have Gyukimaru, a 4-cost 5,000 power character that says if this character is active, it cannot be KO'd by your opponent's effects, and then when attacking, if you have 3 or more attached Dawn cards, rest up to 1 of your opponent's characters with an original cost of 6 or less. I think that cards that will rest other cards can be considered removal in the sealed format, just because of the fact that there's not a lot of just hard KO or a lot of hard bottom decking, and I think that green's form of removal is either resting things or swinging into them at that point to just remove them off the board through combat. So as a result, this is why it's in the removal, and we'll have a few more like this as well. We have Kuina, which is a 4-cost 1000 power character that says you may rest this character, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with an original cost of 4 or less, then attach up to 3 rested Dawn cards to one of your Zoro leaders. And so once again, this is a card that rests another card. Also being able to attach rested Dawn to your leader is pretty nice as well. So you get a little bit of a double whammy with this card effect. Next, we have the 5-cost 7000 power Tashigi. It says on play, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with an original cost of 6 or less, then give up to 3 rested Dawn cards to your Zoro leader. So along the same lines as Kuina, but this one's a little bit better in the sense that it actually has a pretty solid stat line to be able to swing with afterwards. And of course, resting, as I mentioned, kind of acts as like a pseudo removal. So that's also why this card is in here. We have the Helmeppo blocker, a 4-cost 5000 power blocker that says on block, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. So this will take away 1 swing, and it can also allow you to swing into that character the next turn. So pretty important to note. Of course, we already went over the 9-sword style Asura, so that we don't have to go over again. We have the 2-sword style Rashomon, which this is actually a hard removal in the fact that the main effect says you may rest 2 of your Dawn cards and KO up to 2 rested characters with an original cost of 4 or less. There's a counter on this as well, so it acts as both a main and a counter if you'd like to, but the important thing here is that you can KO 2 rested characters that have 4 cost or less for only 3 Dawn, so pretty nice exchange there. We have Kuzan, a 6-cost 8000 power body that says on play you may trash 1 card from your hand. Up to one of your opponent's characters cannot attack until the end of your opponent's next turn. So freezing an attack, in my opinion, acts as a way of removal for that next turn. Of course, the character still is on the field, but it is 1 less attack that is coming your way the following turn. Next up, we have a 3-cost event that is called Buff Burst. It's a main. If your leader is multicolored, choose one. Return up to one of your opponent's characters with the cost of 4 or less to the owner's hand, or if you have 6 or less cards in your hand, draw 2 cards. So the dual mode there is very nice to be able to have a situational event, whether you need to get rid of a body or whether you need to draw cards. I think this card is really good for overall just putting in your deck in general. But for the removal aspect of this, being able to bounce back a 4 cost to the owner's hand is pretty powerful tempo. For purple, we have Miss All Sunday. It's on play, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less is pretty nice. Of course, it could be a little bit underwhelming because there's not a lot of important 3-cost characters, but there are times where this can come out of life and you can KO a blocker that is 3 or less, or maybe in a swing that will be coming your way. So keep that in mind that this card can come out of life and has removal built into it. Next up, we have Ursa's Shock, a 4-cost event that says KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. If you have a character with a cost of 8 or more, you may instead KO one of your opponent's characters that has a cost of 6 or lower. So having the ability to just hard KO something is pretty nice. Of course, 4 for 4 is not necessarily the best use of your Dawn, but if you can get that 6 cost or lower KO'd for only 4 later on in the game, I think that's a pretty good trade. And then finally for removal, we have Slam Gibson, another dual main or counter event. It says main, you may rest 5 of your Dawn cards. If your leader has the Supernova's type, place up to 1 character with a cost of 9 or lower into the owner's top or bottom life cards face down. So this actually answers anything that your opponent will be able to grab or play out of this set. I don't believe there are any 10-cost cards in this set at all. Otherwise, they'd probably be in the game winner section. So as a result, this card is one of the few answers that can answer anything your opponent can play. On to the A for advantage, we have the 7-cost 8000 power Sakazuki. It says on play, if your leader has the Navy type, draw 2 cards. That alone is the reason why you're going to want to play this. You also have an activate main once per turn, trash 1 card from your hand, and give up to 1 rested Dawn card to your leader or one of your characters. That's also a nice little side effect, but the important thing here is that you can draw 2 cards with this. Of course, we mentioned the Buff Burst, the second part of this being able to draw 2 cards if you have 6 or less in your hand. We have Luffy as the man who will become the Pirate King, a 1-cost main event that says if your leader is Sanji, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put 1 card into your hand and place the rest to the bottom of your deck in any order. For only 1 Dawn, you can look at the top 3, grab the best card out of it, and then you can put the rest to the bottom of the deck. So I really like this card because it's a great way to just search out something in case maybe you do have a good card you want to look for and you didn't find it in your opening hand. This card might help you get a little bit closer to getting there. We have Karasu, a 5-cost 6000 power character that says if your leader has the Revolutionary Army type, this character gains +3 cost. That's not the most important stat here. What we're looking at is the when attacking, if your leader has the Revolutionary Army type and your opponent has 5 or more cards in their hand, your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, when you have advantage, you have 2 ways of looking at it. You have 1 where you can draw cards, or 2, one where you force your opponent to discard, so Karasu helps fit that second aspect of being able to force your opponent to discard cards out of their hand. Of course, we mentioned the Nico Robin in the game winner section. I just really think that this card is amazing to be able to just get cards out of your opponent's hand and also have a blocker that's pretty immovable at that point. So Nico Robin, of course, if you can find her in your packs, will help you win a lot of games just based off of the resource game that you're going to be playing with her. But otherwise, she has a pretty solid stat line of just attacking for 7 if you want to use her outside of the blocker effect. So Robin is a must-add for me. Lindbergh is a 4-cost, 5,000 power character that says if your leader has the Revolutionary Army type, this character gains +4 cost. Yet again, the more important effect here is on play, draw 1 card and trash 1 card from your hand. The filter is very nice. So you only get it once though, but make sure it's an important use of it, because sometimes if you have a card you're just wanting to get out of your hand, this card can help you do that. In yellow, we have Kalgara, a 5-cost, 6,000 power body that says your turn. When a card is removed from your or your opponent's life cards, draw 1 card. Then you cannot draw cards using your own effects during this turn. I really like this card to be able to get more value over the course of a game. If this isn't your opening hand, you should absolutely keep that hand because of the fact that you can, over the course of the game, get more cards off of this ability. The earlier you play this down, the better. Probably one of my favorite cards for card advantage in this set is the 5-cost Sabo. If you have 3 or less life cards, this character gains blocker and +3 cost, and then on play, you may add the top card of your life cards to your hand, draw 2 cards, and trash 1 card from your hand. So you're actually drawing 3 because you're getting 1 from life, you're getting 2 from your deck, and then you're getting rid of the worst card from your hand, and you also have a blocker, more than likely, because of the fact that you're probably going to be at 3 or less life cards. So I really like this card for the insane amount of value that you can get with it. There is a Baby 5 2K counter, which has a nice trigger. If your leader is multicolored, draw 2 cards. Otherwise, this is just a 2K counter, but the trigger is important to note. And then we have one of the secret rares from the set, 5-cost, 6,000 power Bonnie blocker. On play, if you have 8 or more rested cards, draw 2 cards and trash 1 card from your hand, then set up to one of your Dawn cards as active. Being able to draw 2 and trash 1 is a really nice effect, especially later in the game when you're maybe looking for certain cards to help you close out the game. On to protection, we have a lot of cards in this section. There's a lot of blockers, there's a lot of events, and plenty of 2Ks as well. So let's get through this as quickly as we can. We have the 4-cost, 6,000 power Shanks blocker. I think this is probably one of the best blockers you can get from this set. On the opponent's attack, once per turn, you may trash 1 card from your hand, give up to one of your opponent's leader or characters -2,000 power during this turn, so it turns any card into your hand into basically a 2K. We have the 3-cost Ippenmatsu. This is if your leader has the slash attribute and you have 6 or more rested Dawn cards, this character cannot be rested by your opponent's effects and just has a blocker stat line on top of that. Next up, we have the 2-cost 1,000 power Kushiro blocker. If one of your 5-cost or lower slash attribute characters other than this character would be KO'd by an opponent's effect, you may rest this character instead. You're not going to have a lot of KO effects in this set, but it is important to note, I do think that this is a nice little cheap blocker to add in though. Of course, we mentioned the monstrosity of the 8-cost Mihawk, so that's the best blocker in my opinion in this set. We have the Helmeppo, which we also talked about, being able to rest a 5-cost character on block. We have Jaguar di Sol, a 6-cost 7,000 power blocker. Nothing else to it other than that, but it is a really solid card because it has a 1K counter on it. We have a 4-cost 5,000 power Borsalino blocker that says once per turn, if this character would be removed by your opponent's effect, you may trash 1 card from your hand instead. And then on the opponent's turn, if your leader has the Navy type, this character gains blocker and +1,000 power. We have Vinsmoke Reiju, which is just a solid 4-cost 5,000 power blocker. If you have 4 or more events in the trash, this character gains +2,000 power and +5 cost, but I really don't think you're going to be hitting that 4 event threshold in the trash, so it's not really worth mentioning that part of it overall. Then we have a 3-cost 4,000 power blocker with Eporio Ivankov. Its on play is if your leader has the Revolutionary Army type, trash 3 cards from the top of your deck. I think a lot of people that are newer into the game might see this as a negative, but honestly, it's not too much of a hindrance anyway. So I think that the blocker aspect of it is probably worth playing this card regardless. Next up, we have Hack, a 4-cost 5,000 power blocker. If your leader has the Revolutionary Army type, this character gains blocker and +4 cost. And then on KO, if your leader has the Revolutionary Army type, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with an original cost of 4 or less. So actually, this belongs in removal as well, but I didn't see it until right now. So the important thing here is that it has blocker and it also can remove something. So that is a really nice card here. And actually, if you can get this card, which it is a rare, so it's going to be a little bit harder to find, I believe, but if you can find it, I think this is an auto include for the deck. We talked about Sabo being able to draw a bunch of cards, Trafalgar Law, another 6-cost 7,000 power blocker with a 1K counter, pretty solid stat line there. And of course, we also mentioned the Bonnie that can also draw you cards, and it has blocker built into it. Before we go over the events, I do want to point out a couple of other cards that don't have blocker on them, but do add protection to your leader. We have the 6-cost 8,000 power Crocodile. On your opponent's attack, once per turn, Dawn -1. If your leader has the Baroque Works type, up to one of your leader or character cards gains plus 2,000 power during this battle. So once again, we're seeing a card that can give you, based off of the effects on the card, plus 2,000 power, so essentially giving you a 2k counter for free. And then we have the 3-cost 1,000 power Bonnie in yellow. This is an activate main. You may rest this character up to one of your supernova type leaders, gains plus 1,000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn. So that will allow you to attack with this for an additional 1,000 power, but also defend with that additional plus 1,000 power. And then the trigger here will allow itself to be played out for free. Onto the events, we have a 0-cost To Never Doubt. That is power. It's a main. You may give up to 2 active Dawn cards to your Silver's Rayleigh. Your opponent cannot activate blocker if that leader or character attacks during this turn. So this actually could be a game winner as well because it can bypass the blocker stat, but also it has a counter. Give up to one of your characters or Silver's Rayleigh plus 2,000 power during this battle for 0 cost. We have another 0-cost event that says counter, give it to one of your character or your Silver's Rayleigh plus 2,000 power during this battle. Then you may rest one of your Dawn cards. If you did, give all of your opponent's characters and leaders minus 1,000 power during this turn. That's really powerful to be able to give that blanket minus 1,000 power to everything on the opponent's side of the field, including the leader. That's something you don't see the 10-cost Shanks doing. So actually, this is a really cool card to be able to grab and might surprise your opponent. Next, we have Armament Hockey, which is a main. You may attach one active Dawn card to your Silver's Rayleigh, give up to one of your leader or characters plus 1,000 power during this turn, so buffs and attack, but the counter, give up to one of your characters or your Silver's Rayleigh plus 2,000 power during this battle for 0 is also very nice. As I mentioned with the 9-sword style Asura and also the 2-sword style Rashomon, these are both counter events that give your leader plus 3,000 power. We have Ice Block Peasant Peck, which is a counter event that says give up to one of your leader or character cards plus 4,000 power during this battle, then trash one card from your hand. The second part of that, trashing a card from your hand, does actually suck, but the fact that you do get that plus 4,000 for only one is something that is a pretty good trade-off. And in the later stages of the game, especially if your opponent is trying to go for lethal, you don't mind trashing that extra card from your hand to get that plus 4,000. And then we have Waxing Fist, a 1-cost counter event that says up to one of your leader or character cards gains plus 2,000 power during this battle. Then if you have a revolutionary type character with a cost of 8 or more, that character gains an additional plus 2,000 power. You're usually going to be using this for only the plus 2,000 for one, but sometimes you can actually get that second part off, and when you do, it feels pretty good. And of course, with any release event, as many 2Ks as you can put into your deck, I think you should be putting into your deck. These cards will help you in the long run stay alive for longer. There's a lot of 2Ks in this set. There was a lot of 2Ks in the last set as well. I think that we're seeing a trend of Bandai starting to print more 2Ks. I don't know if it's more for these release events or just in general trying to have filler cards, but a lot of these cards can also be doubled out as characters because they have interesting stat lines of like 5 cost 6,000 power, 6 cost 7,000 power. But instead of going over each one of them individually, I'm just going to go ahead and show you all of them. So if you need to keep these in mind, you can always just pause and take a screenshot and then save that for later. And then on to everything else. I think we've covered pretty much all the cards you should be including in the deck, but there's a few that I think that we haven't covered that could be interesting to add in. We have a 3-cost 4,000 power Jinbei. It says on play, you may reveal 2 event cards from your hand. This character gains rush during this turn. Then this character gains plus 1,000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn. So there are some situations where you might have to go in for an extra attack and you need a rusher. This card can get it done if you do have 2 event cards in your hand. Next, we have the 4-cost 4,000 power Monkey D. Luffy. I think the most important thing here is the first part of the stat line saying if you have 2 or more attached Dawn cards on the field, this character gains plus 2,000 power. Essentially, that makes it a vanilla stat line, a 4-cost 6,000 power character. The second part of it, the on play, is likely not going to be able to be fulfilled, so I'm not going to even read over that. And then we also have a 4-cost 5,000 power Zoro that says while this card is in your hand, it cannot be played by an effect. That's not really an issue there, but the cool part about this is that if your leader has the slash attribute, this character cannot be KO'd in battle by slash attribute cards and gains plus 1,000 power. So with the Rainbow Luffy, you have all attributes, meaning that you have slash, and if your opponent has the Rainbow Luffy, then this card just sticks on the field. It can't be KO'd by the opponent's leader, and they have to use something else to KO it. And then of course we have the vanillas that we want to include in our deck. These will include anything that have the stat line of 3 cost 5,000 power, 4 cost 6,000 power, 5 cost 7,000 power, 6 cost 8,000 power, and 8 cost 10,000 power. I would actually argue that the 8 cost 10,000 power cards could be considered bombs because of the fact that there's just no way to answer them other than like one event. And you're not going to want to swing into these as well. So once they stick on the field, they're going to be there for a while and probably help you win the game at that point. So there are a few. They have the Shiki and the E-Shows you can see on screen, but the rest of these cards you're going to want to include just because they have really good stat lines to be able to play on curve. So there you have it. That's everything you need to know for the OP-12 release event. As I said at the beginning of the video, this is one of the weaker sets when it comes to the release event, but I do think it's still worth going to and having fun at. I think the most important thing is if you are having fun, go do this, because these events only happen at the beginning of the sets, and they're also great ways to get early access to opening cards, and I think that's a lot of the fun for a lot of players here. If you have any questions about the release event or any cards in general, please let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.